Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Snapshot, episode 39. I'm Brendan Patrick, joined always by Marvel Snap phenom KM Best. KM, your week in Marvel Snap, sir.
A lot of Loki. What I've been doing on stream is every day I'll try to find a deck that isn't Loki to play. And then I'll find that deck, and then I'll lose a bunch of cubes with it. And then I will go back to playing Loki. It's not even so much that the decks aren't good. It's just like, at the highest level, I feel like Loki beats pretty much everything that isn't Cerebro 3. And I can't escape the feeling, because like I have to have about a 60% win rate to climb where I'm at. And there are decks that can be like okay, but for the most part, the fact that you're playing them against good Loki players means that you're just food a lot of the time. Like decks that would be fine to play into Loki at perhaps lower levels of play are absolutely not fine to play into Loki at the top end, is my experience. I've come to believe that Loki is maybe the most skill testing deck in Marvel Snap. And then there's the mirrors, which are just like, they're skill testing, but once you both know what you're doing, it's very much just a who drew what game.
Yeah, I feel like that tends to be how a lot of mirrors go in most games is, even the ones where the decks, they feel like they're very skill oriented. It's like once you get to the limit where the players both know exactly what they're doing, just become very draw heavy. How do you find the experience as a content creator and a player? You know, looking back to maybe an era of Conquest where you'd stream Conquest on stream, you'd be going for the 5-0s, you'd be going for the Infinity Conquest, which it's challenging, right? But you definitely could choose maybe not the most S tier deck, like the pinnacle. Yes. You could choose a sort of a tier 1 deck, something slightly under that and play. But currently in the ladder system, that doesn't seem to really be an option, or at least a very viable option.
If you're trying to climb, you're throwing if you're not playing Loki. And I do think that there's like something to be said for like a skill diff in the deck. I still see people playing the deck really badly. I still see people who don't understand you need to have different plans for different matchups. Don't understand that the power of the deck is the versatility, not the fact that you just YOLO Loki and win every time. It's that you're so many decks in one. And also it's a deck that of course scales with, knowing what your opponent is doing. So then if you're going to be a Loki deck or a different deck in this matchup. It scales with knowing how to deploy your opponent's plan and knowing what to focus on out of your opponent's plan. So like in a Loki mirror, Quinjet's not very good because board space is important and hand size is important. But against high Evo, Quinjet is really good because what you really want to do is Loki them on 4 into like a 4-cost 6 drop, a 1-cost Cyclops, and like a Misty Knight and a Sunspot, and then you play that into their wave turn, and then you win the game, right? In those situations, like the fact that like there are just 2 decks where one Quinjet is just not a card you want to play, and the other one is like Quinjet is one of the best cards you could play, is like there's a lot of that in the Loki deck. And I think that is like the major thing that people don't seem to get. They don't think about it the right way. They think of it like a high roll deck or whatever, and so they play it badly. But one of the things that really sticks out to me is despite all of that, I checked the stats on Snap.fam, and Loki has a higher played win rate than the Infinite and the Living Tribunal. Played win rate.
But the
like played win rate is like the most bullshit stat that has ever existed because it is biased towards cards like the Infinite and the Living Tribunal. And after Infinite, this patch, Loki has a higher played win rate than those cards.
Yeah, which is pretty incredible. I mean, you talk about some players playing the deck badly. What do you think is the number one mistake most of those players are making?
So one of the ones I see a lot is, I think most generally speaking, it's understanding what your opponent is doing and how you interact with it. But a little bit more specifically, like if you're playing my build of the deck, I see a lot of people playing Snow Guard on 1. And if they don't have a Loki in hand and they aren't planning to Loki on 3, there's no real reason to actually do that, because the turn you play Loki is, if it's not going to be a Loki on 3 game, you can pair Snow Guard with Loki on 4 and there's no downside to that, right? You are also going to be able to save the Snow Guard for like a collector if you have that in your hand, right? That's one of the ones I see a lot. Another one is I'll see people like on turn 4 in matchups where they should be prioritizing, like in a Loki mirror. I'll see people play a kitty, then Loki.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, that should almost never happen. Like, that card is so much more valuable as another shot at high rolling your opponent's Loki than it is as a kitty pride.
Mm-hmm.
And that, like, there's just like stuff where it's like, I see people misidentify what the matchup they're in is by using just like heuristics, right? Like, oh, well, I mean, that's what I do. I play kitty, right? It's a snow guard. It costs 1. I play it on turn 1, right? I don't have to think about whether or not that'll brick my hand with the Agent Coulson. I don't think I have to think about if I go snow guard, Sentinel, Agent Coulson, I end up not being able to top deck Loki. Only you do have to think about that stuff. Like, you have to think about it all the time. I don't have to think about whether or not playing kitty plus Loki is right. Kitty's always right, except sometimes a 1/4 is not going to be that good and other cards will, right? Like, and there's even context to that one. Like, if you have an Angela and you think that Angela is going to be really important, then maybe the kitty is the card that makes sense. Maybe it is. Maybe that extra 2 points matters a ton. I don't exactly know, because these are very contextual decisions.
Mm-hmm.
But basically, the mistake people make is not approaching them in context and playing from heuristics with Loki. Another mistake people make is not understanding when they need to just be like a Cosmo deck or whatever. Like, in a matchup against something like Phoenix Force or whatever, if you can just get them with that, that is how you win. You don't win by giving them your deck, like, or you don't win by getting their deck a lot of the time. Like, you win by playing mid-range Angela, Collector, Legion, Cosmo, right? Like, you can just win like that. And I think a lot of people tend to just get sucked into like, I'm gonna do the broken thing, and they don't understand that it's not actually that broken against a lot of decks.
Yeah, maybe players are not correctly turn mapping enough in that deck and just kind of focusing on the individual in a vacuum rather than sort of holistically looking at the game. Do you feel like the new ladder system is forcing the meta into more like a more homogenous state due to how thin the margins are when it comes to winning at the highest level? And then naturally in any sort of card game meta, it does seem like the large majority of the decks that are played, or in most of the games that are played, are just kind of copying the top end. And the top end prior to the leaderboard system was Infinite Conquest. It was tournaments, but in Infinite Conquest and in tournaments, you could see, you know, a variety of decks winning at any time, right? I mean, we've been talking on this podcast. It's like,
no, that's not ladder. That's not ladder's fault. That's Loki's fault.
Okay, so yeah, so you think that so is Loki? Is it overwhelmingly more powerful than any other sort of top? I don't know what you would say, dominant top tier decks that we've had in the past.
Here's what I can tell you: I have played more than 600 games of Loki in Infinite. My record is like 400 and 200.
Pretty good for a
That's
card
berserk.
game.
Yeah, like, that's not okay. Like, here's another one. I have one non-Loki deck that is over a 50% win rate at high Infinite. One. Like, it's not like, I'm sorry. It's like, it's not the meta. It's not that. It's just like, at the highest level, the deck is the best deck by a significant margin. And I feel like people are going to be like, counterpoint, I sorted by 100 plus data on Untapped. And it's like, all right, look, the gap between rank 1 and the bottom of Infinite is, as far as I can tell, based on SP, about 5,000 SP, which is about the same as the gap between the bottom of Infinite and a player who has been playing for like a day. All right. Like, I do not think, with all due respect to the amount of people in Infinite, I think it has become pretty clear that there are some significant gaps between the bottom of Infinite and the top of Infinite. And you can see this by people like Dara and Dexter hard climbing, people like Johnson hard climbing. These are people who are very good at the game, but they also climbed like 2,000 SP in like 2 to 3 days. Like, this is something that was doable only because those people in those other ranks were significantly worse than them. You cannot normally climb 2,000 SP in a few days if you're where you're supposed to be. And I think that Loki especially is like, I guess I would say, an underratedly difficult deck to play. When you look at the decks that are succeeding on those metrics, right, like high Evo at 100 plus is very high. And I think that speaks to high Evo is really fucking easy to play. It's really hard to fuck up high Evo. You are not going to be like, oh, I misidentified shit with high Evo. You do one thing, and that's what you do in the game. With Loki, it's like, no, you really, like, you actually can play the deck badly. With high Evo, like, the skill floor is so high. Like, it's very hard to play high Evo badly.
Do you feel like you have a lot of opportunity to outplay your opponents in Marvel Snap in a ladder format, like best of one, contrary to Conquest? Because my experience at Conquest, even Infinite Conquest or at the high levels in like a curated tournament, was that I feel like there was a lot of opportunity to do that. How do you feel about that at the higher Infinite ranks?
So the way matchmaking is most of the time it matches me with people in my bracket, and then like some percent of the time it matches me with somebody who doesn't have a number by their name, which means they're below 5,000. Mm-hmm. And it's never clear how far below 5,000, but based on the MMR gains I get from beating them, it's pretty far. So it's like the opportunity to outplay is counterbalanced by the fact that losing to them is like twice as bad as winning to them is good. Mm-hmm. Like I've lost, I've gained 17 from an 8-cuber, 17 snap points from an 8-cuber, and I've lost like nearly 40, right? Like it's any opportunity to outplay is counterbalanced by how punishing it is to get those pair downs.
Yeah. Interesting. All right, well, let's head into the news. So you and I were kind of joking about it beforehand, but this week in Marvel Snap, not the most impactful in terms of card releases and shakeups to the meta. That might change, but I want to get your thoughts on Ravonna, or just hear it from you, Ravonna Renslayer, the 3/3. It says ongoing. Your cards with 1 or less power cost 1 less, minimum 1.
No, those are my thoughts.
Yeah. Not great, huh?
She's okay. I don't know, man. Like, she's the exact kind of deck that Loki blows the fuck out, basically, right? Like, Loki's specialty is just absolutely shitting on, like, anyone. It shits on 2 things. The first is anyone playing efficient cards, like, fairly, right? Mm-hmm. And the second one is like anyone who's like, I'm going to invest to get this discount, right? Because in the first case, Loki just plays your efficient cards better than you. And in the second case, you probably invested more than Loki in getting that discount, and it's less conditional for the Loki player. Mm-hmm. And so you just end up in this situation where like every deck you build is just like, oh my God, why are we doing this at all?
Do you think that the meta is, at least in your experience, your individual experience, do you find it to be healthy, or would you prefer a more rock, paper, scissors oriented meta?
Get Loki the fuck out of here, man.
Okay.
Like, we had such a good meta beforehand.
Where's your personal pain point with Loki, and what kind of system
the
or
fact that
gameplay
the fact that it's the best deck in the game by an extremely large margin, and it kind of kills my ability to play anything else. Mm-hmm. Like it is the best deck in the game by such a large margin, and the only decks that I think are actually good into it are dog shit like Cerebro.
What prevents you from playing Cerebro 3 yourself?
Every other deck in the game.
Yeah, but theoretically, because you just mentioned it before, that your pair downs can be pretty intense in terms of how far you can go down. So deck variability is probably correlated to that. So do you feel like you have this somewhat weak matchup in the form of Cerebro 3, but it is actually almost impossible for you to play it because you have the possibility of a pair down, which can be so punishing. You can face a non-meta deck. Yeah,
exactly. Or not even like a non-meta deck. Most other meta decks, literally everything but Loki. Like you lose to like a Red Skull, a Red Skull existing and doing the thing that it does. Like you lose. It's actually really frustrating because you have like, I've got a Valkyrie Shadow King deck. I should be good into Shuri, except you just aren't because of Red Skull. And it's just like, oh, okay, that's kind of awkward. There's just a bunch of like weird stuff where it's like, man, I like this deck and I want it to succeed, but it just won't or can't. Like, how's Cerebro 3 beating High Evo? How you beating a wave? How you doing that? Like, I don't know. Like, the best chance you have is you turn 5 magic the turn they wave you. But even then, they still do a pretty decent amount of points. Oh, and by the way, they have a Cyclops that turns off your shit because you can't play Luke Cage, because if you play Luke Cage, Loki gets to turn off the Valkyrie and the Shadow King that you use. And so it's like, very, very good. I don't get to win that matchup. That's nice.
So we have Mobius releasing. Mobius is the 2/3 says ongoing. Your cost can't be increased. Your opponent's costs can't be reduced. Do you foresee this being enough to shake up the meta?
I do think that people underestimate just how important Loki's discount is to him being good.
Oh yeah.
Like it like getting your opponent's cards is one thing, but like I don't think people think about it the right way where it's like, okay, when I get my opponent's 2-cost card, I'm getting a card that's like twice as good as theirs. Like when I get my opponent's 2-cost card, I'm getting like a Silk 1/5 is twice as good as a Silk 2/5. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Like a Silk 3 or like a Spider-Man 2 is like 1.5 times as good as a Spider-Man 3, right? Like it's a significant force multiplier, and I think that's the thing that makes the mid-range deck matchups so punishing is they tend to be built around these good 2s and 3s, and Loki is just getting those times, 1.5 to 2. And that is like if it said something like get your opponent's cards double their power, I think people would understand why that's fucked up. But in this case, the power doubling is like in the context of energy discounts, and it's not strict doubling, and so it feels a little more nuanced, but like a lot of Loki's power is wrapped up in that. And so I do think there is a chance. I think there could be a chance that like, for like a mid-range deck like Darkhawk, right? Giving your opponent just this bad piece of shit garbage might be fine, right? Like if they have to pay full cost for your Darkhawk and your Rock Slide, well, then they can't play them both on the same turn. That's like good. But then the issue is like, okay, you're playing a deck like Darkhawk, you give them your Mobius, and now your Zabu doesn't do anything. It's like, oh, it gets a little weird, basically. I think people are going to think it beats Loki, and it is strong there, but I don't think it's... I don't know. I'm interested to see what happens. Basically, I think Mobius being out makes the game interesting again. Mm-hmm. Means that there can be some movement where previously or currently I just don't think there's any type of movement at all.
I remember seeing a developer response back in the early days of Hearthstone, responding to players asking for buffs on cards by reducing their costs, and they tried to explain that these players who were asking for this didn't correctly appreciate how powerful that was, how powerful a reduction in just a single resource could be, because it generally means it just comes down a turn earlier. You talk about going from cost 2 to cost 1. It's like almost a linear increase of power of 2x. It feels like, and I think that I think Loki is powerful because of how it reduces the cards in your opponent's hand. I think getting your opponent's card is actually probably bad, right?
Yeah, it's bad. Yeah, like getting just your opponent's card sucks, right? Like that's not good.
Yeah, you take your synergistic deck, right, and now just replace it with half of your opponent's cards, and you don't get their full deck, and you don't have your full deck. It's just kind of a bad deck. I mean, there's no way that. I mean, maybe if Quinjet, but you would have to be landing that card consistently. You'd have to be getting value. You have something like Collector, and I just don't think you're going to get enough value out of those cards to not, Mobius is going to affect the Quinjet as well. So yeah, I think this is genuinely going to change the meta, because I don't think that Loki is good outside of the cost reduction, like whatsoever.
Loki's not good outside of the cost reduction, but like the rest of the deck kind of still is. Mm-hmm. Like, and that's the issue, right? Like, it's not just that Loki is like this massive broken card that like showed up and created an entirely new archetype. It went an archetype that I already thought was really good.
Yeah.
Like, I'll tell you what deck I do think benefits from Mobius, though, and that's Move Wave. Or just like that deck feels like it benefits a ton from Mobius, because that deck gets shit canned by Loki's discounts more than any other deck. Like, you talk about mid-range decks that are dependent on 2s and 3s, right? And it's like, all right, so my turn 2 is a Kraven, my turn 3 is a Spider-Man, my turn 4 is a Silk Jeff, and then they play Loki on turn 4, and then their turn 5 is Kraven and Spider-Man and Silk Jeff, and you're just like, what the fuck was I doing this whole game? like they Loki you, and their turn 5 is your entire game. They play everything on their turn 5 that you played for the entire game, and you're just like, why do I even fucking bother? Like, you like, why do you bother? I don't understand. Why would you bother? I don't really get it.
The funny thing about cost reduction in games like this is that I think that it's asymmetrical in terms of what, like, where the cost reduction happens on the curve. Like 6 to 5 is powerful. Sometimes because 6 drops can be, I guess, much more powerful than 5 drops, but going things from like 2 to 1 and especially 1 to 0 is where it starts to get insane. And we saw that with the original working of Quinjet. Is like when you have 0 cost cards and you actually don't have to incur any sort of cost for them, it's actually busted. It's completely overpowered.
Well, I mean, I think original Quinjet, I mean, honestly, or like 0 cost cards weren't busted. It was 0 cost cards that drew cards.
Yeah. Well,
like that's 0 cost cards. Like, I feel like a lot of people are like, oh, we shouldn't let him discount to 0. And it's like, dog, I do not think that is the issue. Like, I do not think that the problem with Loki is that he cannot discount, is that he can discount to 0. Like, when is that ever happening? Honestly, like, it's like, okay, you get like a 0 cost kitty and a 0 cost snow guard. That can matter. But like most of what matters is like, holy fuck, they just Collector Coulson Loki'd me for 5. Like, that's bad.
I think your point about Mobius is actually pretty valid. With this card might be very, very good against a Loki deck, but the Loki exists in a deck. The shell is already very good, and you would put your opponent in a position where it's like they have to draw Mobius or my deck shits on them, and that's actually not a bad spot.
Yep.
And it's like if they draw Mobius, my deck still functions.
Okay, if you draw Mobius, I can still play my deck. If you don't draw Mobius, you fucking die, idiot, because you played a deck that needs Mobius to beat me, right? And it's just like, oh. That seems bad.
That's a good spot. But
on the other hand, like,
yeah, it's a good spot to be in. As the person playing the Loki deck, I mean, Marvel Snap, obviously 12 card game, low variance, but that is a decent spot to be in. It hinges on the equity of your deck winning in matchups where the opponent does draw Mobius, and if it's high enough, then you probably won't see a lot of shakeup of the meta. But it might give enough. It might be enough percentage points off of the Loki deck that it allows other decks to sort of emerge and exist in the metagame where that's
exactly it. Right? Like, it just. You don't need to you just need to take a little bit off of it. Give other archetypes some room to breathe. Like, one place that I'm interested to see Mobius is like, if Cerebro 3 now with Mobius, right? Mm-hmm. That's like a really interesting card all of a sudden, right? What if you're a Cerebro 3 wave deck where you use wave offensively with Mobius? Is that stupid? I don't know. But there's like, that's already a deck that beats Loki and is now getting a legitimately powerful new tool that can take the deck in legitimately powerful new directions, right? I don't think Mobius is going to enable the mid-range decks to beat Loki, but it'll enable them to do it some of the time, right? It doesn't have to do it all the time. It just has to be like, if you give move wave, like, it's being crushed under a weight right now. And you just need to give it a little bit of room to breathe. And if it has just a little bit of room to breathe, that can change everything else. And like that, like, once something has room to breathe, once you can play it without like immediately getting shit kicked by 25% of the people you play against, suddenly it can actually impact the meta again.
Yeah.
And that's important.
And then the ripple effects to the metagame as, that deck becomes more playable, allowing, sort of room for other decks to exist in the metagame. Right. That's the thing about...
I'll tell you what I think Mobius might actually counter is Galactus.
Oh God, please no.
Because like there's like right now a lot of the Galactus decks are wave decks. Mm-hmm. And a lot of their strongest early games are that. And if they go for like, Electro Hobgoblin Galactus, that's like a 1 cube winner at most of the time, 2 cube at most winner, right? And so they're in this weird spot where they want to play their own Mobius so they can make wave one-sided, right? But I'm not sure if that's actually worth the slot, or if you're just supposed to be like, screw it, we're good. We're just going to be Galactus anyway. Worst case, it's a 50-50. And then there's like I don't know, that's like a reasonable backup plan for those decks, just like YOLOing the wave with priority. And they might not be able to do that in a Mobius world anymore. And that's like, I think basically Mobius has a reasonable shot at giving non-galactic, like the things people hate about this meta, Galactus Loki, has a reasonable shot at reducing their occurrence rate. And I think that's good.
In retrospect, I mean, it's hard to say in retrospect. We'll probably talk about it next week, but I'll just ask you still now. Do you think that if you could have rewound a bit to when Loki came out and maybe the week after, do you think you would have pushed the release of Mobius up if possible, if technically possible?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, I would have. Without question. But I think you probably don't ever do that as an actual game dev, because all that will happen is people are going to be like, oh, they made a problem and they're selling the solution, right? Like,
and they'll also ask you to do it every single time, right?
Right. Also, I just think like I would accept an argument that Loki is not problematic anywhere but the top end of ladder.
Mm-hmm.
I'd buy that, because the deck is, as far as I can tell, legitimately very hard to play correctly. And you can see this in the fact that like High Evo is a high performer at 100 plus data, because that matchup is free for Loki. Like it's actually free. If they have the slightest idea of how to navigate it, the High Evo deck is never going to beat them. But like I'll still get people in my YouTube comments saying like, "Oh, I just waved them," and it's like, that's an indictment on your MMR.
Yeah. We said that last week, that the impact of wave on a metagame is the Turing test of Marvel Snap. It's like that has been happening for so long. People talking about like, oh, but what happens if they wave you? It's like, oh man, what game are you playing?
Yeah.
It's hilarious. Yeah. All right, let's head into the bend and snap, because we had a lot of comments on the last video. So there's going to be two here, Kay. I just want you to sit through both of them, because I call this the dichotomy of bots. So first one comes from Comrade 2K7. They say, why doesn't Cam understand that bots give the illusion of people being good players? Winning keeps people vested in the game. It's the casino effect. Non-card games are doing this too. The casual fan doesn't know they're facing bots. My grandma loves this game. She makes decks based on character appearances and still climbs. Then we have another comment. This is from RJBY The Lake, and they were replying to someone. And they said, I'm happy to see that I wasn't losing my mind. You're not going to tell us otherwise. Basically, it was a little bit hard to read, but it gets down to
read it out loud.
I'm trying.
I want to read it verbatim.
I don't think I can. I have the bold.
Read it verbatim.
I can't. They say I can't get to 80 due to bots. And it is not that it's not as if I'm playing the deck wrong. I don't know when to retreat. I went 10 games. I don't know if it said 1. 10 games off retreats, losing cubes. Yada yada. Basically losing because of bots, and one person says that bots are the reason why people win. They give them the illusion of being good players. The dichotomy of bots.
First person's right, actually.
Yeah.
First person is right. That is why bots exist in the new player experience. But when you say like, I don't know why Cam doesn't understand that, right? That's totally cool for the new player experience. They shouldn't exist past that. Mm-hmm. Like your grandma should not be infinite. Right? That's the problem. That's when I talk about like why bots should, like, sure, if you want to say they're an integral part of the onboarding experience of Marvel Snap, go nuts. But your grandma should not be infinite. As to the second person, I'm trying to figure out a nice way to say this. Bots are not the reason that you are not rank 80. Bots are way easier to beat than humans. Mm-hmm. You are almost certainly not playing them. And I think that the 100,000 people in Infinite, like I believe you could be playing bots, but my experience is a decent amount of them are pumpers now. They're not even like cheating to beat you. They just do stuff.
Yeah, they switched that around recently.
They did. Yeah, they did. And in addition, I do not think you should struggle to beat even the cheater bots, mm-hmm. because they are generally, again, following fairly simple rules.
Yes, there's an algorithm there.
Yes, you can very easily figure them out. If you are playing cheater bots, you should be plus cubes against them.
Yes.
The vast majority of the time.
I think that it comes down to beating a cheater bot is extremely easy if you can pass step 1, which is recognizing you're facing a bot first. And there used to be, I don't know if it's still really the case, but there's a few tools you can do. You could use to figure that out. It was like there were certain variants that they couldn't have. There were certain decks that they were definitely selecting from a specific pool. You would see cards that you would pretty much never see played. You would see them played to the board, and you're like, okay, that kind of tricks something up. You would see certain names, etc. But Could a cheater bot, and like we talked about, they kind of took those out a little bit, at least reduce them. Could that
they reduce their incidence rate a lot?
Yeah. Could they take cubes away from you and hurt your climb? Yes, but on the whole, they are extremely easy to beat as long as you recognize and realize what you're facing, because they will put you in scenarios where the only reason they're staying in the game is because they have you beat 100%. You basically just have to be able to recognize that. It's like, okay, there's a 50-50 going on this board. If I take the 50-50, it's not a 50-50. It's 100-0 and I will lose.
That's what you need to understand. Like against the bots, just don't take 50-50s. Just don't do it.
Yeah.
Don't take them. Don't be like, oh, if I go here and he goes here, I'm going to win. Don't do that. Don't do that. You can do that against a normal player. And that's actually the thing that bothers me the most about a bot is, first of all, I think a lot of people misidentify bots, especially now. They've gotten a little bit better at hiding them, but a lot of people misidentify them. There's a lot of misinformation out there about how to identify them. Like I've seen people saying like, oh, they copy my splits. As far as I know, they have never done that. They do not do that. That would just simply be luck. What they do is they tend to end the turn about a fixed amount of time after you. They tend to make plays that rely on like specific RNG outcomes, and you can see that happening. And they tend to have, and this is not always true, they tend to have like weird splits, like just weird ones that a human being wouldn't have, like a super awesome variant that's like blank and not like modified at all, or like a foil with like an awesome foil with a super rare Kirby, but it's like a prism foil, and like nobody would actually run that. The stuff like that is like, that's such a weird split that you should get your bot radar up a little bit. Like the aesthetics of a random number generator rather than the aesthetics of a human. But like none of that is obviously proof of them existing. The only proof we have, of course, is that they have been confirmed to be in the game. But I do think that if you're struggling to reach rank 80, your issue is not that bots are preventing you from getting there, because I think that if you are almost certainly a good enough player to be smart enough to beat the bots enough times. Like on the whole, they should be helping you, not hurting you. Like there's an inflection point. There's like an inflection point, right? Once you hit X level of skill, they're going to be helping you. And all you need to do is hit that level of skill and understanding. Yeah. So I think you'll be okay.
One thing I want to point out, though, which definitely used to be the case to like a very egregious and apparent extent, but is still the case, is just the climbs to infinite are not the same. They can be drastically different from player to player, depending on where they end up in the MMR and like what's being fed to them. I don't know if it's regional based as well, like availability of opponents, etc. But people's climbs
after the SP thing came out, that makes perfect sense, right?
Yes, it does.
Like when you look at the fucking the drastically large amount of people who have 6,000 SP, I feel like there's probably 50,000 people, like half of Infinite is probably in the 6,000. And people over 10K, I think there's probably like 25 of them.
Yeah,
on all servers.
And what I want to point out is like, I know there's some people that get really irritated when we talk about the infinite climb being a chore, we talk about it being boring, but that's because we've passed, like, again, not to overuse the word, but an inflection point to where it is like that. But there is certain areas of like the ELO or the SP or whatever, where your climb will be harder. Well, whether it's just because you're facing more opponents or I don't know, but you're not getting fed this like bot fiesta that we are. And yeah, I know some people just get really frustrated about it. It's not as bad as it used to be. It used to be pretty gross, but you might just be in a section where you have to face more opponents. So it still doesn't mean that it's a skill issue, maybe why you're not getting there, but it might be frustrating to see some people kind of get it for free while you have to go through, you kind of jump through.
It definitely is frustrating. There's no might about it. Like, it must suck to look at me and be like, why the fuck does this guy get an easy climb and I get a hard one? And the answer is because the devs have prioritized protecting you from me more than they've prioritized my gameplay experience.
What?
The answer, weirdly, is that they prioritized you.
Yeah, it's weird because it's different now because we have a leaderboard. But what do you think about Infinite, like the highest rank, the most prestigious rank in Marvel Snap, being so accessible and being in a sense so fueled by this like artificial experience via bots? It feels a bit inauthentic.
We got to start talking about Dumpster Infinite, man. Like, I don't even know what to say about it. Like the fact that there is such a gap between low and high infinite. There are people in infinite with like in the 5,000 SP range, right? That's half of where I'm at. Like that's nuts. That's insane. The implication there is that I am as far away from them as they are from someone who's never played the game.
Mm-hmm.
That's wild. Like what this infinite has done to me is called into question the legitimacy of any data using infinite as a proxy for skill.
Yeah, it is.
That's what it has done for me. Right. Is made me think, damn, this 100+ filter is not helping me.
Yeah, it's just weird that. What do you think about it from the publisher side, where they've decided they made a ranking system, and we've been talking about the issues of the ranking system for almost a year now. But they made a ranking system, and then they put the top end of their system, and of course, like I said, they implemented leaderboards, so there is something after that. But their highest rank to be so accessible, and to an extent, it gets artificially fed to people via systems like bots. It's like it feels weird and on rails to an extent to get to infinite. Mm-hmm. And I understand that if you're listening to this, you haven't hit infinite or you hit infinite once, like you will get one climb or two climbs that are hard. And then after that, you'll eventually get into an ELO bracket where that is not the case, or maybe you just get more experience with the game. But I don't actually
think that's true. I think if you stay in the 6 range, you'll probably play a bunch of people all the time. I don't really know.
But is that easier? Like that? Oh, it's definitely harder than the climb that
It's definitely harder than beating a bot.
Yeah, it's definitely harder than beating a bot. It's definitely harder than the climb I get. It's just, what do you think about the philosophy behind Second Dinner putting their highest rank to be so accessible to so many players? Is that the way to go? Is that the experience you want to give players? Like everybody can reach the highest rank, or does that take away from?
I don't think they wanted. I don't think they cared. Like, why do they have a leaderboard? Because a bunch of people wanted a leaderboard.
True.
That's it. They don't care. Like, and that's not even like a bad thing. It's just like, it is what it is. They are not built to be a game. They don't want to be Hearthstone, you know? They're not built for that. They want to be a casual game, right? Why do they have a leaderboard? Because they can. Because a bunch of people were like, hey, can we get a leaderboard? Right? Mm-hmm. It's worth investing in if it's a feature that your customers demand, but it is not indicative of a commitment to like esports or whatever, or competitive play. And that's really what I'm getting at. Or it's like it's not they don't care. It's just like people take it to mean more than it is. What they did was they delivered on a feature that a lot of people wanted, and that does not mean that they're going to do esports.
Yeah, competitive integrity of Model Snap. It's an enigma for sure.
Yeah, like people are like, what about the competitive integrity of ladder? And they're like, what about the competitive integrity of ladder?
I mean,
like,
literally,
what do you mean?
Since season 1, there has been zero competitive integrity to ladder.
But competitive integrity of ladder.
Yeah.
Get out of here.
I feel like the Model Snap ladder system is an artificial system that is fed to you to try to get dopamine ticks and make you feel like a good player.
Yes, that's every ladder system. Yeah. You have invented ladder systems. That is what they are.
But some ladder systems, that dopamine is gated by other human beings rather than it's like literally fed to you by an algorithm. But I guess if you could, I know some people are like, they still feel like even if there was no bounce, they'd be like location batching, counter matchups, etc. Like the algorithm exists. All right.
Whenever I switch decks, I get a counter. This proves that there is a machine in Second Dinner's headquarters focused strictly on me to know that when I put Odin in my deck, they should put Cosmo in. Wait, no, that doesn't work. What about when I put like that always kills me. The deck counter matchups. Like, how do you define that? What would you define as a counter deck?
So what they would do, and I haven't thought about this at all, by the way.
Okay.
I'm coming up with it on the fly. And it's going to sound like I've thought about it. That's why. What they would do is they would take the data. They would match the cards. I guess they would compare the cards against each other. They would just figure out what series of cards has the highest win rate cross-referenced against your deck, your series of cards, right?
But like that would create like, we've seen how complete fucking dog shit like basing stuff off of that kind of information can be, right? That would create like a deck where it's like, all right, so this card is good against this deck for reason A, and this card is good against this deck for reason Z, and we're just going to put all of them in the same deck, and that's going to be a good deck. Yeah, like that's the issue, right? It's like saying like, oh well, okay, you know what beats, like, imagine you're doing this data for Loki and you're like, all right, look, Cerebro's a really high win rate card against Loki. So you put Cerebro in the deck and then you put other cards in the deck that aren't for Cerebro. And it's like, how would you suggest that they do this?
Cerebro Dracula, like, oh my God.
Yes. It's like, what's good against Loki? It's like a mishmash of like 3 different decks. Like, I just like, or they could do it by clusters, right? They could be like, this grouping of cards has had success against Loki, and so we make you play against that all the time. But if that were true, why the fuck am I not playing Cerebro 3 more? Why do I keep playing mirrors? Like, I don't really know. I think the answer perhaps is that a bunch of high-ranked players have realized Loki is broken. Maybe that's why I'm playing so many mirrors. No, it must be deck-based matchmaking. Like, I just don't get it, man. I just don't get it. I've never understood in any game how these mechanics of doing deck-based matchmaking would work, because any kind of like, let's use AI to do this thing would just result in like the dumbest piece of shit deck you could imagine. And like right now, like what? Oh, if they had a Magic Loki counter deck, fuck. I mean, shit, hit me up, like, DM me. Like, you got a Magic Loki counter deck. I mean, the easiest way to get that out there would be to use content creators to spread the word about it. And boy, the fuck have we not done that.
All right. Well, speaking of Loki, we have another comment that comes from Snapchat's pod. They say, do you think the popularity of Loki drives the stats toward 50%, i.e. Loki is in every deck, and Loki wins every game, loses every game? I mean, I'm not sure what data filters we're using.
25% on infinite rank in 25% on infinite rank in on Untapped. But I do think that's like not necessarily a reason to discount those numbers. I think there are other reasons to discount those numbers. But the fact that there's a bunch of mirrors is something you have to take into account when you play Loki.
Yeah. All right. We have another one here from Connor VR. So we talked about the halving paradox last week. And they say the reason it's not a paradox is because the time it takes to travel each half distances is approaching 0. So when you take the limit that considers both distances and time, it matches to how it physically behaves. So you're halving by 0 distance. That actually makes sense. So the halving paradox is actually a framing issue where you're framing where the framing is off distance, the distance approaches 0. And if you were doing it in a bathtub going out of water, the amount of volume, I guess, you were having by would also approach 0 because that's the limit. For people interested in the paradox we were talking about, I actually had there's a lot of people that commented on that, especially on Twitter. Anyway, Cam, I just want to ask you, just a little bend and snap from me. Because we have the Dan Hip spotlight, what's your favorite variant artist in the game?
Hold on, before we talk about my favorite variant artist, I just want to say, if they're going to make money off of these artists' names, they need to be giving a percentage to the artists. I understand that the artists signed licensing agreements with Marvel. I understand that the artists signed whatever rights they had away. I understand that they have no specific delineated right to make money off of the use of their art in this form. That said, they should be making money off the use of their art in this form. Are you fucking serious?
Well, let me tell you what the clear ethical problem is for me is that a lot of people, when they buy these things, think they're supporting the artist, even if it's not explicitly stated. They never lied to you. They never told you that was what was happening.
Lied to you.
But people do buy these bundles. And a lot of people that are maybe not on social media haven't dove into whether that's the case. It is just, it's I don't know why, but I would assume, and it's normal to assume, that this actually supports the artist because it is using the name. There's like this bundle. And maybe it does in the sense that if their bundle sells, they will get more work in the future, but it does not work the way that most people assume it works, where it says, oh, I'm buying this, and part of this will go to Dan Hip or Rain Gonzalez.
I know Dan Hip specifically is actually like a bit of an exception to this because Dan Hip has been commissioned by Marvel Snap for Marvel Snap art. Outside of just like, say, someone like Art Germ who like draws a cover and then that cover gets used on a Snap card, for example, right? Like Art Germ Arrow was a Snap cover, right? And as far as I know, he doesn't make any royalties off of that. He doesn't make any like percentage of the sales of Art Germ Arrow. The rights belong to Marvel. And so, like, as much as, you know, as much as I bag on Archer on this podcast, that still fucking sucks, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, I don't care what you think about someone's art. I'm sure plenty of people hate Dan Hip, but people should probably get a percentage. And I think a lot of the arguments against this are going to be, well, why didn't they ask for that? Or why didn't they sign? There's no reason to give them a lot of this sort of procedural bullshit. I just think that, you know, just because they don't have a clearly contractually delineated right to this does not mean they shouldn't have it. And it certainly doesn't mean that we shouldn't ask for them to get it. So before we talk about my favorite artist, let's talk about that. Second of all, it actually is, I checked recently, because I have like a top 4, right? Mm-hmm. Dan Hip, Flaviano, Kim Jacinto, and Rian Gonzalez are like the top 4, right? But I checked recently about like using the variants that I use. I use way more Dan Hip variants than anyone else. Mm-hmm. Any other artist, like the most Dan Hip variants. And that might just be because there are more Dan Hip variants, but I use like 20 cards that I use are just my default is a Dan Hip. Mm-hmm. Probably more than 20 now. And that is a lot, I think, due to his unique style. I tend to like things that sort of take the piss out of people taking things seriously.
Oh, so you'll love my collection then.
I tend to gravitate towards that, mm-hmm. where it's like, it's the same reason that like all my card backs and stuff were mostly the default guy, the little, like, I just think that I'm a minimalist. I'm a minimalist, and I like sort of shucking norms if I can, right?
Yeah.
And so what that means for me is like I'm this hyper competitive player, but all my variants are like pink and cute.
It's kind of oxymoronic, right? Yeah.
Yes. I enjoy that.
Most of my collection is actually chibis and babies because I thought it was funny in a competitive setting.
It is funny. It is objectively funny in a competitive setting. Yeah. Like it is a subversion of expectations. Yes.
Yeah. All right. Well, that was the Ben and Snap section for this week. If you want to get your comment read out on next week's episode, you can shoot us a comment on YouTube. All right, I just want to go into we don't have not much of a main topic. It's mostly news and Ben and Snap this week. But I just want to get your thoughts on meta complaints, ask if they're valid, and talk to you about
Oh, boy, are they.
Yeah, so
they're valid as fuck.
What do you think about the philosophy behind intervention, and like when should Second Dinner be intervening to sort of change metas like this, whether improve them, buff cards, nerf cards, etc.? How aggressive should they be?
I just don't know what, like... Okay, when you release a card like Loki, it took me, I don't know exactly how many games it took me of playing Loki to figure out how fucked up this was, but it was like day one, mm-hmm. right? It was like, oh, wow, this is heinous. This is like the most fucked up thing I could possibly be doing. It's insane, right? And then there's this like, God, it's so weird to call this a secondary concern, but it's like, all right, we knew how much everyone hated Galactus. Let's make a card that brings Galactus back. What if you just didn't do that? Like, what if you let Galactus languish on the scrap heap of history where he belonged?
Oh, no.
Like,
my boy.
What if you just let him be like a 53% win rate deck the rest of his life? That's fine, right? Like, just let him be like a 50, like a maybe a little bit above 50. But then they made Eliath, and now Galactus has like a 20% play rate and like a pretty reasonable win rate. And it's just like, why would you do either of these things separately? But then also, why would you do both at the same time? I can see the argument for Loki. It's like, all right, we want to just absolutely fucking shit on mid-range decks. We're sick of Shang-Chi decks being everywhere. We're sick of things being built around Shang-Chi. Fuck Shang-Chi. Fuck the horse he rode in on. We're gonna drop a nuke on that deck archetype. And they did that, and you know what? Fine. Sure. But then they released Eliath the very next week. And a lot of the, like, you remember when we had Glenn on, mm-hmm. and he talked about how like Hela was good and Tribunal was good, and he was fist pumping over that? Do you know why those decks aren't good anymore? What? Eliath. Mm-hmm. Eliath! You fucking just gave everyone a tool to nuke one of the things that you were so excited about being here anymore. And you replaced those decks' metagame share with Galactus, a deck everyone hates playing, Like, I don't think this is like something you can leave at Goliath's feet necessarily. Like, Loki is definitely the better card, but all the diversity that there could have been in the metagame, the multiple decks that could have attempted to beat Loki, a lot of them get crushed by Goliath. And so now it's just Cerebro 3 left.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh, okay, now that's the only option to beat Loki, and it's not good anywhere else. And so you're just sitting there like, well, what are we supposed to do?
I think that Loki is one of the most, from a design perspective, is the most fundamentally powerful card that we've seen printed in Marvel Snap because of how many cards you're actually getting reduced in cost, and the paradigm you put your opponent in, where you're copying their deck and reducing the cost, so their only answer is to play a bad deck. Like, just from the pure philosophy, not even playing the card, experiencing the card is, in my opinion, the most powerful card that we've ever seen in Snap. I do think that Mobius doesn't change that aspect. All it will do is make Mobius a must play and a must have to combat Loki, and Loki will still be the best card in the game. If Mobius is good enough of a silver bullet, which I don't think it will be, Loki will see less play, but Loki will always be there. For if Mobius,
how do you even fix him?
Well, first of all, to fix him, you have to change him, in my opinion. Which is that might sound obvious, but I don't think that's a given, because like some people might look at it like, bring more cards like Mobius in, bring more counter cards for Loki, and it will go away. But the way Loki is currently designed, it is going to be, if Mobius is powerful enough, inversely correlated to Mobius. So if Mobius play goes ups, Loki play goes down. But if the meta has to respond to Mobius and the play goes down, Loki will always come back because it's just broken. It's too powerful. How would you change it? Oh, it's like, I don't know. So it's probably like copy your opponent's hand, reduce X number of cards cost.
What about, okay, hear me out. What if he just didn't reduce cost at all? What if we just nuked him?
Yeah, well then he would be
What
bad.
if we just fucking nuked him?
He would still be novel.
What if we just...
He would still be novel.
He'd still be around. Like, what if we just dropped a bomb?
I think that the issue is that, so Loki is... The reason why Loki is so powerful is because you're putting him in a shell where you're getting like max value of the Loki effect. I think if you reduce that top end, like that ceiling on Loki, and you made it a set number of cards that are reduced and maybe randomize that as well, you would stop people from getting entire hands that are reduced by Loki, because that's why it's so powerful. Because if you, like, Loki is directly hinged on how many cards are getting reduced in cost. Like, Loki reducing 2 cards in cost is one level, power level, but Loki reducing 5 cards is like way more powerful, and that's probably
that's just like not how they want to do it, right?
Probably
like,
not.
Here's the thing, though.
It's not congruent with Marvel Snap design, right? Where if it was going to pick 2 cards like at random out of the 5 you copied, like I don't even know if they have the technical functionality to do that, to be honest.
It's half congruent with the design, which is like the way they like dealing with this stuff is by lowering the floor and increasing the variance, right? Leaving the high roll in, but also adding more low rolls. You can see that in how they deal with like basically everything. But I don't even know how you do that with Loki. How do you leave the Loki high roll intact, but also introduce more low rolls? What does that even mean with a card like that?
Yeah.
Like, it would be like I can't even come up with a conception of it that would do it.
Well, first of all, it shouldn't be a 3/5. He shouldn't be generously statted at all with what he's currently doing in the game. Because his effect, in my opinion, his effect is the most powerful effect in Marvel Snap. So you couple
Mr. Negative is still stronger. But like, if we made Loki a 4/4, you cool with that? Because I don't even know if that would change much for me.
Yeah, it's just like Mr. Negative is contextual off the cards that are available and the cards that you build with and the cards you draw, where Loki is, I feel like it's less contextual because you're fundamentally discounting all the cards in your opponent's deck. So the actual ideological paradigm of Loki is that you play your opponent's deck for cheaper. And if you do that without incurring massive opportunity cost, it is overpowered. There's no way it's not overpowered, and maybe that's the same. Negative follows the same sort of.
Where
philosophy.
was this when we previewed Loki?
Dude, I said this. I said this. We can go back to it.
You didn't say it. You didn't say this.
I wasn't as sure about it, but I basically said cost reduction has been the most powerful thing you can always do.
You need to be more sure about this next time.
You could rewind to it. I actually said, "How is this card not broken?"
Next time, I want you to. Next time I want you to give me this version of the argument. I want you to fucking blow me out of the water.
This is what I said. I just said it with less fervor. I said you play your opponent's deck for play your opponent's deck for cheaper. So I evaluated Loki in like 2 minutes because I wasn't thinking about it before. But what I didn't anticipate was how easy it was to fill. Because I thought it was like, okay, put him in a Thanos shell. You draw a bunch of cards with these stones. You put these shitty stones on the board, or somewhat shitty stones, and you're clogging up your board. But ultimately, it's like we reduce a bunch of costs, and like there might be some variance with that. But then what happened, and the shell he got put in wasn't a Thanos shell. It was much more efficient, and he just was crazy. And it's like we took the Loki ceiling and we do it consistently, and that's just too powerful. But I think from a design, like the actual design perspective, like the fundamental paradigm between you and your opponent when you play Loki is you play their deck way better than them. And that's just, it's not, you can't, I don't think you can balance that unless Loki incurs huge opportunity costs, which is kind of what Mr. Negative does, right? You drop it on turn 4, you effectively do nothing on turn 4. This is the design of Mr. Negative, not how it's actually played every single time. But like you drop it on turn 4, it does literally nothing. It takes up a board spot, has 0 power, and then you might draw the cards that are you're going to get payoff for. So Loki being stat as a 3/5.
Whereas with Loki, it's just like, I play it as a 3/5 on turn 4 after playing a Snow Guard, so I get 7 of those cards immediately.
Dude, think about.
By the way, my collector also gained 9.
3/5 stat line, right? 3/5 stat line. Draw parallel to Polaris. Polaris is a very powerful 3/5, but that is seen as like a pseudo downside. I know we a lot of times will use it as an upside, but it's kind of a downside. Loki, just put those cards together and I think that Polaris is on the higher end of power level, but Loki just blows it out of the water with like what it's doing. Because even the floor of Loki, I think, is better than Polaris a lot of the time. Like if you even Loki'd like a couple cards, it's just so strong.
Depends on what's in your hand, but like just Lokiing a couple cards is like, all right, sure, whatever. And I think this is the thing that I missed when evaluating it is like most decks in Marvel Snap do the same thing. It's not like you're a control deck that's getting a bunch of aggro cards that don't do shit for you. No. That delineation doesn't exist.
We all
Every
compete
deck
on the
in Marvel
same
Snap
axis.
does points.
Yes, every single deck competes on the same axis except Galactus to an extent. Galactus still does compete on the axis. There is one win condition to Marvel Snap. One win condition, and all decks function on the axis of trying to win on that singular condition. And you basically you take your opponent's game plan, and then you buff all the cards to high heaven, and then you play those cards. It's crazy. It's just
you take your opponent's game plan, and then you do it approximately like 1.5 times as good as they do.
So how do you balance it? I think that Loki, like I said, the balancing idea that I gave, I don't know if it's technically feasible. I don't know if it's congruent with Marvel Stein game design. But you could print a silver bullet card like Mobius, and I think that you will just have 2 inversely correlated cards, whereas one play rate goes up and the other play, they will just simply balance off each other, which is not actually very healthy, and it makes Mobius a must-own card as well. I also think that Mobius is not that much of a silver bullet, but I do think that Loki, although this would be kind of sad for the people who maybe didn't get to experience him, if it just copied your opponent's hand with no upside, and maybe it had better stats, I guess. You can't really make it a 3/6. Maybe you could. Maybe you could make it a 3/6 or a 3/7. It copies your opponent's hand doesn't reduce it. I think that's the aspect of Loki that the essence they were trying to capture with the design of the card is you have this card in your deck, and now you get to play your opponent's deck, and that's cool. It's a cool concept, right? So keep the essence, but take out the cost reduction is just too much. I never see how it's balanced unless you have high percentage.
So you agree with the nuke. Just get rid of the cost reduction entirely. Just be like, this just copies the cards in your opponent's decks. Fuck you.
We would have to offset it, right? He would have to. I don't think he could be a 3/5 with that ability. It would be too bad for you. I don't think you would see play.
Honestly, if you made him a 3/7 with that ability, I think he's broken, right? Because then he's just like what he reads as is. You go like you just play him as a 3/7 on the final turn of the game and get like 8 points on your collector or whatever the fuck.
Oh,
like you're a dino deck. You're a dino deck that just does like collector Loki final turn, and that's like 15 points.
So
it seems awful.
I actually see the paradigm a bit different. Although that's correct, I would see it as you are guaranteed to play the highest value 3 cost in the game, and then you and your opponent play the same cards for the rest of the game. So you'll just be up on them by 2 points.
But you're not playing it. You're not playing it during the game. Yeah. What you do is you just do it final turn with a collector or whatever the fuck. and then trade in all your cards for their cards, play a 3/7 and get your collector to like 7, and then it's like, ah yes, my most incredibly balanced 14 power 5 energy turn. Seems bad.
It's going to be interesting because we're going to get to see Glenn flex his game design skills, because they've hit pretty well on Galactus, Zabu in particular, where they've reworked cards and not exactly how I expected them to, and it worked out really well.
They did really good, yeah.
So this is going to be a little test for Glenn on Loki. How are they going to fix this one?
Yeah, I'm interested to know, because like, again, they keep saying like, oh, the numbers aren't that bad, and it's just like, brother, I don't know what to tell you other than your numbers are sourced from people who don't know how to play the game. Like, I just don't know what to tell you.
We talked about them balancing around that though, so that's the experience they optimize for. So maybe the numbers are.
That's
okay.
my fear, right? That's my fear, is they just leave this, and it's the only deck I can play for 3 months. That's my fear.
Maybe. Would that be a bad thing is the question. I mean,
yes,
obviously
that would be horrible.
for you, it would be a bad thing, but
really bad.
If the data says it's a good thing, I mean, Glenn came on this podcast and talked about the player they optimized for, kind of, and the experience they optimized for, and then, it's not the top end, and we never expected it to be, but we're assuming that the negative experience at the top end percolates down to the medium end as well, like the play.
At some point, other people will realize that you can beat High Evo very easily with this deck. Like, at some point, people will figure out how to do this, and eventually that will percolate down, right? I still remember in League of Legends, it was a crazy thing to play Lee Sin and drop a ward behind your opponent, dash to it, and then kick them back. And now that's a thing people in Silver do. Yeah. And it's like, that's how it goes.
When like Faker like flash hooked on Thresh, and it was like the craziest like highlight reel, and now I feel like it also happens in Silver. It's
that wasn't Faker. That was not Faker.
Who was it? I can't remember.
I don't know, but Thresh was a support champ. Is a support champ, right? And Faker's a mid laner.
Okay, so I do. You're right. I don't think
it was Bengi.
No, somebody will know, and they will tell us on the YouTube comments. But basically, there was some prominent player. Thresh had came out, and a lot of players were playing Thresh. Thresh is a character in League of Legends that hooks other characters. And bot lane is like very support oriented, and this player was consistently using their offensive spell Flash to like flash and like aggro hook people back, and it was like crazy. And they were heavy
that's
predicting.
Just like normal.
Yes, they were like,
to be clear, that's just like literally normal.
Maybe it was Faker, the one that the opponent flashed and the Thresh hooked, predicting the flash, and it was like the clip of League of Legends, and now it happens all the time. Anyway, Cam, one last thing. one last thing I want to talk about is the deck you posted on Twitter. It's a Patriot. Well, it's a Brood Patriot list.
Yeah.
How do you feel about that one? I didn't really come up when we were talking about the best decks at the top of the pod.
It's cool. Like I like that it doesn't try to cope. Mm-hmm. Like a lot of decks are like, I'm gonna beat Loki by playing Wave, and that is like just like galactic level cope. Mm-hmm. This deck is like, I'm never gonna beat Loki ever. Like, I'm gonna beat Loki when they don't draw Loki, and that's fine. Like, it's not like a great win con, but it will happen a decent amount of the time, and you can play to it, right?
Is this a deck list you have your eye on as Mobius comes out?
Sort of. Mm-hmm. It's a little hard to fit him in there, not just in terms of... Like, there are so many cards that I want to fit in there, right? It's hard for a deck like this to... This is a deck that could run 15 guards. Mm-hmm. It's hard for me to fit Mob in there.
Okay. Yeah. All right. Yeah. For people watching on YouTube, I'll have the list popped up on YouTube. But for people listening, it's Forge, Mr. Sinister, Patriot, Brood, Silver Surfer, Absorbing Man, Iron Lad, Iron Man, Blue Marvel, Alia, Doctor Doom, America Chavez. You talking about 15 cards just reminds me of this funny little thing that's happening in Lorcana right now, because we're very early in the game. There's like all these players that are playing like 61, 64, 67 cards. I don't know how the card game fundamental of playing as few cards as possible is not just lasered into people's brains at this point. But I've got some people making that argument. It definitely makes me giggle. Anyway, Cam, anything else to end on before we close out for the week?
I think I'm good. It's been a pleasure as always, and thank you so much for people listening. I think I broke my expletive record this time.
Yeah, probably.
We're on consecutive expletive record episodes.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, if you're listening to this podcast, you enjoyed all the expletives, you can leave us a review at ratethispodcast.com/snapshot, or you can go to Apple Podcasts or Spotify. It's the number one thing you can do to help us out. It really, really pushes us up in the SEO. So we appreciate it. There's a video version of this at youtube.com/@the_snapshot. Hit like and subscribe while you're there. Helps us out even more. Brendan APG, KM SMS on Twitter. KM is streaming.
That's
KM,
me.
your schedule, sir.
God only knows at this point. 6 p.m., but also sometimes later than 6 p.m., but also sometimes at 6 p.m., but also sometimes not that day. I stream in the evenings, Eastern time, and you will be able to catch me playing Marvel Snap on twitch.tv and yelling at my computer until my throat gets sore. I literally might not even stream today because my throat hurts that much. This is my second podcast of the day. And I just want to not breathe for as long as I can.
What's the goal this season and probably next season? Are you really shooting for rank 1?
Not really. Until they fix how like hard/easy it is to climb. We'll see. Right. I just want to like do well. I basically just try to go positive every day. Mm-hmm. I mean, that has led to, I've been in the top 15 for like 2 weeks or whatever the fuck. Mm-hmm. But it's cool.
Awesome. Thank you all so much for listening. We'll see you next week.